You ever meet someone who smiles at you like they already own your future? Yeah, that was Grant Holloway. The kind of guy who wore polished hiking boots that had clearly never touched mud, mirrored sunglasses even when the sun was going down, and one of those expensive fleece vests with a resort logo stitched on the chest, like he was campaigning for governor of rich people. The first time he stepped onto my bridge, he acted like he was touring property he'd already bought. Slow steps, hands on hips, looking down into the canyon like he was imagining wine tastings and yoga retreats where my land happened to be standing in the way. And honestly, I should have known right there this was going to turn ugly. My place sits on 40-something acres out in Northern California canyon country. Not the postcard version people see online. I mean real canyon country. Steep shale walls, dry brush, rattlesnakes in summer, creek flooding in winter, the kind of place you either respect or it humbles you fast. I bought that land because I wanted silence. No HOA board meetings, no neighbors measuring grass height with rulers, no community guidelines telling me what color my mailbox could be. Just me, my workshop, my dogs, and enough distance from civilization to hear coyotes at night instead of traffic. The only problem was access. Back in 2004, I spent almost every dollar I had building a steel bridge across the creek that cut through the canyon. Not some sketchy homemade thing either. This bridge was engineered, permitted, inspected, every bolt signed off by the county. Cost me a fortune, but without it, getting to the county road meant a brutal 14-mile detour through washed-out fire trails that turned into soup every rainy season. And legally, that bridge mattered even more than the land itself. There was a recorded easement tied to my deed dating back to the late 80s, meaning access through that crossing wasn't optional. It was protected property law. Half the bridge sat on my parcel, the other half touched neighboring land, but the easement gave me permanent legal rights to use and maintain it. Simple, clean, by the book. Then came Blackthorn Wilderness Group. They bought the 200 acres bordering mine and announced plans for a luxury eco-retreat, which is apparently rich people language for charging $6,000 a weekend so tech executives can pretend they enjoy nature while sipping imported wine beside propane fire pits. They wanted cabins, spa decks, meditation trails, helicopter pads, the whole fake wilderness package. And suddenly, my little bridge became very inconvenient for them. See, the easiest route for their future guests ran directly past my property line. Not through it legally, but close enough that they started acting like my existence was ruining their brochure photos. Grant showed up a few times after that first visit, always pretending to be friendly, just evaluating the surrounding infrastructure, he'd say, smiling like a dentist about to pull teeth. One afternoon he brought a surveyor with him. They walked the bridge slowly, measuring beams, taking photos, whispering back and forth while pretending I wasn't standing 10 feet away watching them. I asked what the hell they were doing, and Grant gave me this little shrug, like I was bothering him in his own office. Nothing to worry about, Eli, he said. We're just making sure everything around the resort meets modern safety expectations. Modern safety expectations. Man, anytime somebody says that sentence while staring at your property, your blood pressure should immediately rise. 2 weeks later, I drove into town for supplies, gravel anchors, welding rods, dog food, normal stuff. I was gone maybe 5 hours. And when I came back, I honestly thought I was hallucinating at first. The bridge was gone. Not damaged. Not partially removed. Gone. Just empty space over the creek bed. 20 feet of open air where my bridge had stood for almost 20 years. Fresh torch marks still smoked along the cut steel foundations, and sitting on the opposite bank was an excavator loading chunks of my bridge onto a flatbed trailer like they were hauling scrap metal. I slammed the truck door so hard I nearly cracked the window. The equipment operator looked nervous the second I started yelling. Said he was just following orders. Said the structure had been removed over liability concerns. Liability concerns. I remember standing there staring into that canyon with this weird mix of rage and disbelief because deep down, I realized exactly what this was. They thought they could isolate me, trap me on my own property long enough that I'd either give up or sell. This wasn't about safety. This was pressure. Corporate pressure. The kind rich developers use when they think regular people won't have the money or energy to fight back. So I called Grant right there beside the creek. He answered on the second ring, sounding way too relaxed for a man who'd just destroyed someone's legal access point. I said, Where the hell is my bridge? And this guy, I swear to God, actually chuckled. Then he tells me their engineers determined the structure posed a safety risk for future resort guests and potential liability exposure for the company. Like he was reading from a PR statement. Then he hits me with the line I'll probably remember for the rest of my life. You're welcome to build a replacement bridge that complies with current aesthetic and safety standards. Aesthetic standards. He destroyed my bridge and somehow turned himself into the victim of ugly architecture. Then he hung up on me, and standing there looking at that empty canyon, hearing the creek below where my access used to be, I realized something real dangerous had just happened, because Grant thought money made him untouchable, and people like that usually don't stop until somebody finally humiliates them publicly. Now let me pause the story for a second, because this is where people who've never dealt with land rights usually get confused. Folks hear private bridge and immediately assume the owner of the neighboring land can just remove it whenever they want, like pulling a fence off their backyard. Nope, that's not how easements work. According to standard procedure, once an access easement is legally recorded into a property deed, it becomes tied to the land itself, not the personalities involved. Meaning even if ownership changes hands, the legal obligation stays put. From a legal perspective, what Blackthorn did wasn't just rude or aggressive, it was catastrophic because they interfered with guaranteed access to private property without court authorization. And trust me, judges hate that. Especially in rural counties where access roads literally determine whether emergency services can reach someone alive. But honestly, the legal side wasn't even the most interesting part to me. It was the psychology behind it. This is a psychological trap developers use all the time. They create inconvenience first, then wait for exhaustion to do the rest. Rich companies know most regular property owners don't have endless money for attorneys, surveys, court filings, expert witnesses, so they apply pressure slowly. Make access harder, delay repairs, create stress. Hope you eventually say, you know what, forget it, just buy me out. And the reason guys like Grant act so calm while doing it is because they convince themselves they're the smart ones in the room. In their head, they're not bullies, they're solving obstacles. That mindset is dangerous because once somebody starts seeing human beings as obstacles instead of neighbors, they'll justify almost anything. The lesson here is, if someone with money moves aggressively against your legal rights, document everything immediately. Photos, dates, phone calls, equipment, witnesses. Because once the story reaches a courtroom, confidence stops mattering and paperwork becomes king. And lucky for me, Grant had just handed me enough paperwork to destroy his entire project. I spent maybe 20 minutes down there taking photos, every cut beam, every tire track, serial numbers on the excavator, even cigarette butts near the loading area, because at that point my brain had switched from angry homeowner to full crime scene investigator. Then I got in my truck and drove straight into town to see Diane Mercer. Now Diane wasn't some flashy TV attorney with billboard ads and fake courtroom confidence. She was 72 years old, drank gas station coffee like it was medicine, and had spent 4 decades handling land disputes in 3 counties where people took property rights more seriously than religion. Around here, if Diane Mercer agreed to represent you, folks usually assumed somebody was about to regret their life choices. I walked into her office covered in dust and handed her the photos without saying much. She sat there quietly flipping through them one by one, reading the easement documents, inspection approvals, engineering permits, and the longer she stayed silent, the worse I knew things were going to get for Blackthorn. Finally, she looked up over her glasses and said, Eli, these idiots didn't just trespass. They destroyed legally protected access infrastructure tied to a recorded easement. Then she leaned back in her chair and actually smiled a little. This could bankrupt them. And let me tell you something. Hearing an attorney say the words, this could bankrupt them, after somebody destroys your bridge feels weirdly therapeutic. Diane moved fast. Like scary fast. By that evening, she'd already pulled archived county filings proving the bridge had passed inspection less than 3 years earlier. No safety violations. No condemnation notices. No engineering failures. Which meant Grant's whole unsafe structure excuse was complete nonsense. If they truly believed the bridge was dangerous, standard procedure would have required complaints, inspections, hearings, county review, not a surprise demolition crew with torches and excavators while the owner was out buying dog food. The next morning, we were standing in front of a county judge for an emergency hearing. Blackthorn sent two corporate attorneys in tailored suits who walked in looking mildly annoyed, like this was some scheduling inconvenience between golf games. Grant sat behind them trying to look confident, but I noticed something right away. He wouldn't make eye contact with me anymore. Diane presented the easement first, then the permits, then the demolition photos. The judge barely got halfway through the packet before his expression changed. You could literally watch the mood in the courtroom shift. Then Diane explained the practical impact. No bridge meant my property was effectively inaccessible for emergency vehicles during fire season. That landed hard. Rural judges do not play around with wildfire access. One of Blackthorn's attorneys tried arguing the bridge posed potential exposure concerns for future resort guests, and the judge cut him off almost instantly. Was there a county order authorizing demolition? Silence. Was there an engineering condemnation notice? More silence. Did you obtain consent from the property owner? Dead quiet. Then came the order. Blackthorn was required to fully restore my legal access within 72 hours or face contempt sanctions. Not consider repairs. Not begin discussions. Restore it. Exactly. And man, the look on Grant's face when the judge said, within 72 hours, was priceless. Like somebody had finally informed him the laws of physics applied to rich people too. But here's the thing about arrogant men. They usually double down right before disaster. Grant called Diane the next afternoon, sounding irritated more than worried. Said rebuilding the bridge would take weeks, maybe months, and claimed the cost wasn't accounted for in Blackthorn's construction budget. Diane didn't even blink. She told him, then perhaps your client should have considered budgeting before illegally demolishing infrastructure. Apparently that didn't sit well because Grant started ranting about updated aesthetic requirements and modern resort integration. Still talking like this was some design disagreement instead of a court order. Diane finally interrupted him with the calmest sentence I've ever heard. Mr. Holloway, the judge does not care about your spa aesthetic. Then she hung up. 72 hours came and went. No bridge. No construction crew. Nothing. Just silence. So Diane marched right back into court Monday morning and asked the judge to enforce sanctions immediately. And this is where the whole thing exploded beyond anything I expected. The judge didn't just get angry. He got curious. That's way worse. Because once courts start wondering what else a company might be hiding, everything gets opened. Diane requested a full compliance review of Blackthorn's development permits, environmental filings, water access claims, all of it. And suddenly county inspectors descended on that resort project like sharks smelling blood. Turns out the bridge wasn't even close to their only problem. Their site plans had quietly labeled part of my easement area as future guest overflow parking. They'd underreported seasonal creek activity in environmental applications. Their septic design exceeded allowable soil absorption limits. Their emergency fire roads failed minimum width requirements in multiple sections. One inspector even found retaining wall plans approved under outdated geological surveys. Every few days, another violation surfaced. Then another. Then another. Red tags started appearing all over the property. Stop work notices on excavation equipment. Utility suspension orders. Environmental review flags. The whole construction site slowly transformed into a graveyard of half-finished ambitions. Investors started panicking because rich people love visionary development opportunities, right up until judges and county inspectors start using phrases like liability exposure and regulatory noncompliance. Funding froze almost overnight. Contractors stopped showing up because nobody wants unpaid invoices tied to litigation disasters. And Grant. Oh man, the last time I saw him in person, he looked 10 years older. Same expensive clothes, same polished boots. But now he had that specific exhausted expression people get when reality finally catches up to ego. He tried approaching me outside the courthouse one afternoon, acting suddenly reasonable. Said maybe we could find common ground. I actually laughed. Because a few weeks earlier this guy cut apart my bridge while I was gone and expected me to quietly surrender my land. Now his multi-million-dollar project was collapsing under legal investigations, and suddenly he wanted neighborly conversation. Funny how that works. 8 months later, Blackthorn Wilderness Group officially filed for bankruptcy protection. The resort never got built. No luxury cabins. No spa decks. No influencer hiking trails for people pretending they discovered nature through Instagram. Just abandoned grading equipment baking in the canyon sun while lawyers fought over debt scraps in court filings. And the craziest part? If Grant had simply left my bridge alone, there's a good chance nobody would have ever looked closely enough to uncover the rest of their violations. They destroyed themselves because they got greedy and impatient. They thought isolating one stubborn landowner would be easy. Instead, they triggered the exact legal scrutiny that buried their entire company. And every time I drive across the replacement bridge they were eventually forced to rebuild. Yeah, rebuilt entirely at their expense by court order. I still think about that phone call where Grant told me my bridge didn't meet the aesthetic standards of his future resort. Turns out bankruptcy court isn't very aesthetic either. You know what still sticks with me the most about this whole thing? It wasn't even the bridge. It was how fast people with power will convince themselves that rules are optional the second money gets involved. Grant genuinely believed he was the main character in everybody else's story. In his mind, my land wasn't a home, it was a complication. My bridge wasn't infrastructure, it was an inconvenience standing too close to his investor's fantasy resort. And honestly, that mentality is becoming way more common than people realize. You see it with aggressive HOAs, corporate developers, even wealthy neighbors who move into rural communities and immediately start trying to redesign everything around them because they think expensive property automatically makes them important. But the truth is, property law doesn't care how polished your presentation is. Courts care about records, easements, permits, timelines, boring paperwork. And that's exactly why Blackthorn lost. Not because I was richer than them, because trust me, I wasn't. Not because I had political connections. I didn't. They lost because arrogant people usually underestimate quiet people who keep documentation. From a legal perspective, the second they demolished legally protected access without authorization, they handed control of the situation to the court system. And once judges feel like somebody intentionally ignored process, they tend to start digging deeper. That's the part developers never seem to understand. One act of greed invites scrutiny into everything else. According to standard procedure, major construction projects survive on compliance layers. Environmental approvals, fire access standards, drainage plans, easements, utility permissions. Pull one thread, and the entire sweater starts unraveling. That's exactly what happened here. And psychologically, this whole thing was driven by entitlement. This is a psychological trap powerful people fall into when they spend too much time getting their way. They stop hearing the word no as a boundary and start hearing it as a challenge. Grant couldn't tolerate the existence of one independent property owner sitting beside his luxury project refusing to cooperate with the image he wanted to sell. So instead of negotiating like an adult, he escalated. Quietly, strategically, the kind of escalation people think they can get away with when they assume the other side lacks resources. The lesson here is, never let intimidation convince you your rights are smaller than somebody else's money. Because most of the time, bullies count on exhaustion more than strength. They want people to fold emotionally before anything ever reaches a courtroom. And honestly, if I hadn't documented everything immediately, the torch marks, equipment serial numbers, phone calls, timestamps, they probably would have spun the whole story into some unfortunate safety misunderstanding. Documentation saved me. Comms saved me. Letting professionals handle the fight saved me. And there's another part nobody talks about enough. Revenge doesn't always look like screaming matches or dramatic confrontations. Sometimes revenge is just standing still while somebody else destroys themselves trying to overpower you. Blackthorn could have built their resort. They probably would have made millions. But greed has this weird effect where people stop respecting limits once success feels guaranteed. They wanted total control over the canyon, total control over the image, total control over the narrative. And in the end, that obsession cost them everything. Meanwhile, I'm still here. Same land, same canyon, same creek running below the bridge every winter. Except now, every neighbor around here knows exactly what happened to the company that tried to bully its way through property law. So yeah, if there's one thing I hope people take away from this story, it's that being quiet does not mean being weak. Sometimes the calmest person in the room is just the one holding the strongest paperwork. And honestly, I want to hear what you guys think. If somebody destroyed the only legal access to your property, would you have fought back the same way? Or would you have taken the buyout and walked away? Because I'll tell you right now, Grant definitely thought I'd sell. And I think the moment he realized I wasn't going anywhere was probably the exact moment his entire empire started collapsing.